Today we're going to take apart an engine that I would otherwise not get the chance to if it wasn't for the generosity of one of my viewers. Phil at GAP Automotive in South Florida shot me an email a couple weeks ago saying he had a couple engines in his shop. He wanted them out of there and he'd love to see them torn down on the channel. Just pay the shipping, which is exactly what we did. We got 2 engines shipped in, and one of them is this BMW B58, which I didn't think I'd get the chance to get one of these for a few years. These are, for the most part, still under warranty. This is a 6-cylinder turbo engine. Comes in most BMW models, especially the rear-wheel drive platform stuff. And again, this is a current engine. This is still produced today. This is also in the new Supra. So I'm excited to see what makes this thing tick or explode, which is looks like that's what happened. Just a heads up, a few days ago I got in a fight with a chair. The chair is broken and my nose might be also. So if it sounds like I can't breathe, it's because I can't breathe. Some of you may be looking at this engine and a little confused. Why is the timing stuff on that side? That's the bell housing and there's the crank pulley. Well, it looks like BMW moved the timing components to the back of this engine, and that usually means that it's an engine out service if a timing component fails. But the good news is that BMW has never, ever once had timing guides or timing chain failure. Historically speaking, BMW V8s are the ones with guide and chain problems, not so much the 6-cylinders. So hopefully this isn't a big deal down the road, but only time will tell. One thing this engine's predecessors were known for, especially the N54 and to a lesser extent the N55, leaking oil filter housing gaskets would soak the serpentine belt, and that serpentine belt would walk off the back of the crank pulley and get sucked into the crankcase, into the timing system through the crank seal. That happened on a lot of engines. It kills a lot of engines, but it doesn't look like that's possible on this engine, especially considering the timing is on the back. This engine is obviously destroyed. It looks like it had a rod come through this side of the block. There's also a matching hole on the other side of the block. We're going to call this the double pane version. Also, as many of you can notice, this engine is pretty well stripped. This is a bare engine. It's likely had the pan off of it before, so if you see some stuff missing when we pull the pan, when we get that far, don't be surprised. I get a lot of cores that way. A lot of cars get diagnosed that way, and nobody gets paid to put a bad engine back together. Normally, the first thing I would do would be to pull the plugs, but in this situation, we already know this engine is blown up, so let's just start pulling it apart. Let's get the valve cover off. I missed one. Much like the N55, the B58 uses BMW's Valtronic System on the intake side of the cylinder head to control the amount of air this engine sees. It has an electric motor which rotates this eccentric shaft, which varies the amount of engagement of the actual cam. It does this by pushing on these followers, which have rollers that go between the actual cam lobe and the rocker for the valve itself. Here's a good look at that system. I can't really rotate the eccentric shaft with the motor here. But here is the rocker for the Valtronic system, and there's the rocker for the valve. And as this eccentric shaft rotates, it pushes this forward and backwards, which changes the engagement, the amount of engagement of the camshaft. So far, the inside of this engine looks pretty clean. The cams look good. There's no oil or metal deposits. I don't see anything awry on the top side. The next thing we need to do is get this chain off. So we're going to take the tensioner out first. That was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Now we're going to take this bridge guide out. Looks like a couple Torx. That'll come off. Then we're going to take the bolts loose for the guide here. Try to get as much slack so I can see if I can slide that chain off the cam gears. Otherwise, we'll just take the cam gears loose. Well, that was easy. Guides look good. Still a lot of tension here. Well, we're going to use the impact, get these off. Hopefully I'm going the right way here. The next step for us is to start pulling the head bolts out because this head is almost ready to come off. We just got to zip the head bolts out. So I'm going to start with the small bolts that are in the front or back of the engine. There's a few of these E10s. We're going to get those out, and then we'll get the actual head bolts out. In order to get all the head bolts out, I need to take the actual camshaft out for the intake side. So we're going to crack those cam caps loose. Well, that was fun. What have I done? Boy, this is a wreck. Woo! These springs are pretty strong. They probably did that out of order, but it doesn't matter. It'll all go back together just fine. Well, that really wasn't planned. I'll be completely honest. I'm sure there's a tool that holds all that stuff in place so you can get the cam out without parts flying. I don't have it. This is only the second or third engine I've torn apart with Valtronic. We don't really do a lot of this stuff. So you live and you learn. If I start getting more of these in, I guess I'll be investing in some tools. All right, let's start cracking head bolts loose. I don't know if I'll need the impact for this or not. I don't have this engine on a stand because I can't really put it on a stand, but nah, they'll come loose. Let's pull the cylinder head. I got all the parts that flew off. I found all of them, got them in a box so I can put this head back together if the head is good. But I got all the head bolts, and this should come right off. Ooh, she's heavy. This is really heavy. Let's get this head gasket out of the way. Fits like a glove. Well, come on out of there. I can almost get this piston out. There we go. And then, there we go. It's perfect. Let's go right back together. It's part of a ring. The rest of these all seem to be pretty decent. This one, well, got more pieces, another ring. This one's broke pretty bad, but we kind of expected that was going to happen. As you can see, the actual bore isn't too bad until you get to the very bottom. The cylinder walls look decent. It's not like this thing was hammered for some time, and somehow the cylinder head looks good. This is the cylinder that had the broken piston, and the spark plug isn't even regapped. There's a couple pieces of metal. It's really not bad. There's a little ding there at the top of that valve. Maybe that's just carbon. Pistons don't look like they made contact with valves. Boy. Looks pretty decent. I might be able to sell this head. Now we're going to try to take this rear timing cover off. Now, did they pull the bolts out already? Yeah, there's no bolts that go between this and the pan that are still there. So this should come off. Should being the opportune word. There's the timing cover. Also looks like a good part, but don't know if there's any demand for any of this stuff. Here is the chain that feeds the cams. I don't know what this is. We're going to take it off. Let's get this. Ooh, that had some punch behind it. Oh, I see there's a chain that hangs down here. That's probably for the oil pump there. So was this some sort of balance shaft? I don't know what this controls. I honestly don't know. Let's get this bolt out and maybe we'll find out. That's interesting. It's just a timing idler. That's good. Can I get this chain off? Can I get this chain off? All right, there's the oil pump chain. Looks like the oil pump is gone. Let go. Chain number 2. Perfect. All right, we're getting somewhere. Just looking at this, it's a piece of piston just hanging out right here. Let's see if we can get this crank pulley off. Well, that was easy. Wow. It's got some mass to it. I'm going to take a moment and clean up all the stuff that has been coming off this engine, all my tools, and I'm going to flip this engine upside down so we can pull the pan, the crank, and the rods and pistons. I've got this thing flipped over. It looks like someone's taken most of the oil pan bolts out, made my job a little easier. So let's get the few bolts out, see what kind of treasure lies underneath. Oil pan's kind of colorful. Wow, that's way worse than I thought it was going to be. There's a stir clip. There's some, I don't know what you want to call that material. We'll investigate that in a minute. Inside of the pan, as always, filled with junk and this tarry stuff. Could that be why this engine let go? I don't know where it came from. The pan actually looks like it survived this catastrophe, which we'll have to run it through the parts washer and see if there's actually any cracks in it. As you can see, this looks pretty bad. You can see straight through both sides of the engine. There's part of the piston with this, I don't know what you want to call this on it. Does anybody else know what this is? It's gross. I don't really want to touch it. But the journal does not look very torn up. This actually looks pretty good. And this little bitty mark here, that likely happened during this explosion. You can see how destroyed that block is. It's pretty impressive. And this lettering stayed together. I think that's pronounced melee because that's what happened to this engine. Also worth noting, it's part of a rod. The stubby end. This doesn't have a bunch of marks on it either. It looks like the rod just, oh wait, no. It looks like the rod broke. It just broke. I was just driving down the road. No, that's not what happens. Sorry, guys. stuff doesn't just break. Let's get this window tray off and see what other carnage we can find. It looks like this block did a very good job at containing the melee to the back. A lot of other engines, when they let go, it just wipes the whole thing out. The rest of this engine doesn't look too bad. The next step is to take all the rod caps off, and then we'll get the main caps off, pull the crank out, we'll turn the engine on its side, and push all the rods and pistons out. Those two are going to be tough to get. We might have to rotate that crank over. All right, let's see if we can rotate this crank. Nope, definitely not. Let's see here. It's very, very much stuck. I don't really want to go hammering on this crank because it could be okay. I don't know what the rest of it looks like. So we got to find some other way. Aha! That should be enough. Bearings look okay. Let's keep these in order so we don't lose them. Nope, that doesn't fit. Now it's time to get the main caps off. Looks like I should be able to pull this out just like so. Just like so. Well, the block is just, we know that was junk. But the bearings look really nice. Rod bearings and main bearings alike. I do not think this was an oiling issue whatsoever. It's pretty atypical for this channel, I'll be honest. Now the crank, that could have gone either way. That could have been bad. It could have been good. All the journals look pretty good. But if you notice, that counterbalance is a little off kilter. Look at that crack in the counterbalance. Crank is destroyed. It was almost ready to come off. Now I'm going to flip the engine up on its tail. Yes, tail. So we can push the rods and pistons that are left in it out. Well, it's really easy. Let's try the first one. Smooth. Rod looks like it's in good shape. Piston 2. Put these in order here. Let's try number 2. Same deal. Everything looks okay. Nothing too terrible yet. It's the last one. Oh, we got some pieces. Some McNuggets. Uh-oh. That rod's bent. I think we might have our answer. Yep. They're not supposed to be shaped that way. Not going to say it. That rod's straight. That rod's straight. That rod's also straight. That one's straight. And that one's bent. I'll say this again for the people in the back. You can't compress water. I mean, you can, but this is what happens. I think we know what happened now. I like how this engine waited to the very end to tell me this. I don't think this engine died of natural causes, but I'm pretty sure that nature had something to do with its demise. Do not drive through standing water unless your life depends on it. Don't do it. It's not worth the risk. Even if you make it through the other side and the engine doesn't hydrolock. You can get water on the inside of your car, control units get wet, connectors get wet, you'll be chasing gremlins forever. Not to mention, it's going to stink. This engine really kept me guessing the entire time. And I don't know whether it's because I was missing parts, like I didn't have an oil pump with it, I didn't have an intake manifold or a turbo. I didn't know what happened to this engine, but as we pulled it apart, I didn't see any reason to suspect that it was an oiling issue like a lot of the engines that come through here. The bearings look good, the journals look good. However, once that number 5 rod came out, oh yeah, I knew what happened. It sucked in water, it hydrolocked, it bent number 5 rod, and it bent 6 rod bad enough where it sent it through both sides of the block. And that was an expensive mistake. Hopefully insurance picked up the tab because I looked that engine up in our system and it retails for over 21 grand. That's a ton of cash. That's like 21 90s BMWs. I can't imagine. I can't imagine having to foot that kind of bill. I'm pretty impressed with the B58. For the first time, the first engine I've worked on, the first time I've ever touched one of them, I liked its construction. It's a lot simpler than an N55, although I admit I don't have really the proper tooling to work on the cylinder head. If I get a lot more of these in or more N55s in, I'll probably invest in some better tooling. But until then, I'm just going to kind of wing it like shooting parts across the shop. Sometimes that happens. I hope you enjoyed this teardown. If you'd like to buy parts off of this engine or any of the other engines I've torn down, I'm going to leave our email in the video description. And as always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all. And I'll catch you on the next one.